When a freshly baked chocolate brownie breaks open, it triggers an immediate physical response. The steam rises, the dense center stretches, and the chocolate exists in its absolute peak state of gloss and warmth. But that state is temporary. The moment it leaves the oven, heat dissipates into the surrounding room, and internal moisture begins to evaporate. Replicating that gooey, rich experience, whether translating it from a recipe or capturing it for a lens, requires navigating a very narrow margin of physics and chemistry. The ideal brownie relies on hacking the three main pillars of human perception: taste, sight, and touch. Achieving this specific texture is a process of sensory engineering. Every environmental variable must be strictly managed to stabilize an otherwise fragile chemical structure. The foundation of this process begins with mapping the chemical compounds found within 70. This visualization charts the flavor architecture utilized by sensory experts. Broad flavor groups like vegetal, floral, and sweet occupy the center, branching out into highly specific notes like dairy or brown spices on the outer ring. Translating this into a finished dessert requires exact ratios of bittersweet chocolate, rich butter, crystalline sugars, and precisely measured flour. However, the physical environment actively interferes with those carefully measured ratios. Baking at anything above 3,500 feet introduces a significant drop in atmospheric pressure. Without standard atmospheric resistance, leavening agents react too quickly. Massive gas bubbles expand and collapse. At high altitudes, liquids evaporate faster, drying out the crumb structure. Saving it requires specific interventions: increasing oven temperatures, decreasing sugar, and adding flour to forcefully stabilize the internal matrix. Achieving the perfect taste is a matter of chemically adapting a recipe to survive the physical environment it is baked in. A culinary masterpiece must visually communicate its flavor profile before it is even tasted. The first visual threat to chocolate is fat bloom. When temperature fluctuations occur, cocoa butter recrystallizes on the surface as a white, smooth film. By contrast, sugar bloom creates a rough-textured white coating caused specifically by condensation pulling sugar to the surface. Food artists capture the essence of a brownie by deconstructing the kinetic energy of a salted caramel pour shot. To achieve the perfect flow, photographers chemically manipulate the caramel by thinning it with water, achieving a smoothness that heated caramel cannot maintain. Capturing this requires an exceptionally fast shutter speed, 1/200th of a second, to freeze the liquid mid-air and maintain absolute sharpness. Capturing warmth presents its own challenge. Without precise lighting, rising steam registers as a blurry, gray blob on a camera sensor. This schematic shows the lighting requirement for vapor. To make it visible, the camera requires a primary backlight positioned directly behind the subject and angled upwards into the vapor path. Contrasting values are necessary to define the subject. Light blockers and dark backgrounds offset the white vapor to make the steam legible. Capturing the distinct dancing swirls of steam requires waiting past the initial intense boil and timing a fast shutter release perfectly. Making a brownie look appetizing on screen relies on deliberately altering its physical state and exploiting camera optics to construct a visual illusion. The final pillar of perception is touch, known by professional chocolatiers and sensory panels as mouthfeel. Experts evaluate mouthfeel on precise scales, measuring the physical presence of particles, its graininess, and the force required to unstick chocolate from the palate. The primary enemy of mouthfeel is time. Evaporation turns a soft, fudgy interior into a dry, hardened brick in 24 hours. Reversing this degradation requires the precise reintroduction of moisture and controlled heat to gently rehydrate the crumb structure. The microwave method uses a slightly damp paper towel draped over the brownie. Short 15-second bursts create a micro-steam environment that softens the center. On the stovetop, a covered skillet on ultra-low heat warming the brownie from the bottom up, trapping steam to soften the center without burning it. Reviving a stale brownie is an act of controlled thermal physics, restoring the original engineered mouthfeel by manipulating heat and ambient humidity. Culinary perfection is achieved by identifying and strictly controlling the physical variables of our environment. This requires adjusting flour to combat mountain air pressure, balancing shutter speeds to freeze steam, and utilizing damp towels to resurrect a dessert's original texture. These interventions exist at the intersection of culinary art and physical science. The perfect brownie is not merely food, it is a highly calculated, multi-sensory engineered masterpiece.